The hum of the first-class boarding area in JFK's Terminal 5 buzzed with muted luxury. Ice clinked in crystal glasses, business deals murmured over Bluetooth headsets, and well-dressed passengers scrolled through stock updates on gleaming tablets. Nestled in the lounge leather recliners sat Zara and Zay Caldwell, 25-year-old twins who radiated quiet power. Their rich, deep brown skin glowed under the ambient lighting, and their matching burgundy blazers hinted at polished professionalism. But behind their ease was purpose. This flight to Zurich was more than leisure. The sisters were headlining a global tech summit, showcasing EquiChain, the blockchain platform they built to bring secure banking access to underserved communities. Zay glanced down at her watch, a sleek, silver Swiss model gifted by their mother after their first funding round closed. "We board in 10. Gate B9, she said softly, sliding her tablet into a monogram tote. Zara, the more observant twin, noticed the sudden hush that fell nearby as a tall, narrow-faced flight attendant named Denise strode through the lounge. Denise's crisp uniform seemed starched to perfection, her blonde bun unmovable, her gait exacting. What struck Zara, however, was the way Denise's eyes locked onto them. Not a polite glance. Not professional acknowledgement. It was the cold, questioning stare of someone deciding where you do or don't belong. Without preamble, Denise stopped in front of them. "Miss Caldwell?" "Miss Caldwell," she asked, glancing between the two women. Her tone was clipped, saccharine with a metallic edge. Zara raised an eyebrow. "That would be both of us," she said evenly. Denise forced a tight smile. "We have a situation. A couple, long-time elite passengers, were mistakenly booked in business class due to an internal error. They've requested to be moved to their usual seats, 1A and 1B. Z's eyes narrowed. "Our seats," she said quietly. "Yes," Denise replied, her smile faltering. "Would appreciate your flexibility in this rare instance. You'll be generously compensated and reseated just a row back. Still premium." Zara stood slowly, not in aggression but with gravity. "We booked those seats 3 months ago. Paid in full. Chose them specifically for privacy. This is a work flight." Denise's smile turned brittle. "And I respect that. I truly do. But Mr. and Mrs. Langston have been flying with us for over 15 years. They're deeply loyal customers. This adjustment would mean a lot to them." Z's voice sharpened. "So would respect. We earned our seats. Are you asking because you think we'd just roll over and smile for a voucher?" Denise's eyes flickered with irritation. "Please, there's no need to make this racial," she said quickly, cheeks flushing. Zara tilted her head. "We didn't," she said coolly. "You just did." The tension in the lounge became electric, pulling the attention of several nearby passengers who glanced up from their newspapers and tablets. Denise exhaled sharply, then crouched slightly to murmur. "Look, I'm trying to avoid escalation. They're important. You're newer. I'm asking nicely." Z locked eyes with her. "So now we're less important?" Denise blinked but said nothing. Zara pulled out her phone and scrolled until she found a name, Dad, direct line. This could have been a conversation. "But since you want escalation, let's go there." Zay nodded solemnly. "Let's call Dad." The lounge fell into silence as Zara tapped the speakerphone icon. The phone rang once, twice, then connected. A rich, commanding voice filled the space. "Zara? Everything okay?" came the calm, curious baritone of Dr. Elijah Caldwell. Denise shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to remain. "Hey, Dad," Zara said, her tone casual but loud enough to carry. "A flight attendant is trying to reassign our first-class seats to someone else. Says we're newer. Less important." There was a pause, then Dr. Caldwell responded slowly, his voice suddenly ironclad. "You're flying Majestic Air, right?" "Yeah," Z confirmed. "Flight MA204 to Zurich." "Stay on the line," he said. "Put her on." Zara turned the phone toward Denise, whose confident stance was starting to dissolve. "This is Denise," she said tightly, her voice pinched. "I'm part of the in-flight service team. We were just trying to correct a booking error." Dr. Caldwell's response was immediate and sharp. This is Dr. Elijah Caldwell, Executive Chair of Majestic Air's Diversity and Ethics Committee. I also sit on the board of directors." The blood drained from Denise's face. Passengers nearby stiffened. "I'd like to know why my daughters, 2 verified first-class passengers, are being pressured to vacate their seats. Are you aware this call is being recorded?" Denise's voice shook. I wasn't aware, sir." "Clearly," Elijah replied. And are you aware that any attempt to demote, relocate, or diminish passengers based on perceived importance without cause violates Majestic's tier equity clause, which I authored? Denise looked as if she might faint. No, sir. I was only, following what precedent? Elijah demanded. The kind where white loyalty trumps black achievement. He didn't shout, but his voice carved through every syllable. Those women built one of the most innovative platforms we've ever seen in fintech. They're flying to represent not just Majestic, but American ingenuity. You tried to unseat them for a couple you assumed held more value. You're finished, Ms. Denise. Denise's mouth opened, but no words came out. Across the lounge, whispers flurried. A suited man, clearly another airline official, walked briskly toward them, headset already pressed to his ear. Behind him trailed a short woman with a clipboard and the severe look of someone who ran things. Ms. Denise, she said firmly. Please come with us. But, Denise stammered. Now, the woman snapped. We've reviewed the incident via security feed and are escalating to HR. Denise looked to Zara and Z one last time, face crumpling. I didn't mean, you did, Z replied coldly. And you thought we wouldn't say anything. That was your biggest mistake. As Denise was led away, the Majestic manager turned to the sisters with a smile that brimmed with apology. Miss Caldwell, on behalf of the airline, I'd like to personally escort you to your gate and ensure you're seated without further issue. Champagne will be served on boarding, and the captain wishes to meet you both before takeoff. Zara and Z exchanged a glance, the tension in their shoulders beginning to fade. The phone still rested in Zara's hand. Dad, she said with a faint laugh. We're good now. I know, he replied, softer. But don't let anyone ever convince you that you don't belong in the front. As the twins were guided down the jet bridge by two uniformed airline representatives, whispers followed like a trailing wind. First-class passengers, already seated and sipping pre-flight cocktails, turned to glance discreetly as Zara and Zay entered the cabin. A tall pilot with silvering temples and epaulets stepped forward from the cockpit door. Miss Caldwell, he said with a measured nod. Captain Rourke. It's an honor. Heard about the incident. Disgraceful. He glanced meaningfully at the attendant now refilling drinks behind the bar cart. My crew will ensure your comfort. If you need anything at all, press that call button. Zara smiled politely, but Zay couldn't help noticing the faint flush of discomfort in the other passengers' faces. Guilt? Or simply the realization that someone they'd likely dismissed as influencers or seat fillers were anything but. They settled into 1A and 1B, spacious pods outfitted with reclining leather, ambient lighting, and privacy partitions. Their laptops slid into designated compartments. Flutes of chilled Dom Perignon appeared seconds later. Do you think it's over? Zay asked quietly as she buckled her seatbelt. Zara's lips curved into a knowing smile. Not even close. You heard Dad. There's going to be an inquiry. Back in the airline's corporate offices in Manhattan, the fallout began before the flight had even crossed the Atlantic. At 4:45 p.m. sharp, a meeting alert labeled urgent, code red, Zurich flight incident pinged onto the calendars of half the executive team. Raymond Yu, Majestic's VP of Global Customer Operations, stood staring at the paused video feed from the JFK lounge. Denise's words. Her posture. The exact moment she said, there's no need to make this racial. It was all there, recorded, time-stamped, and deeply incriminating. You turned to his assistant. Pull her employee file. Then call HR. I want a statement drafted by morning. Simultaneously, an internal Slack thread titled Langston Priority Override began surfacing among Majestic's scheduling team. Apparently, this wasn't the first time the Langstons had demanded top-tier reassignment at the cost of confirmed passengers. In 3 previous incidents, their elite loyalty status had been invoked to justify bumping others down, none of whom had filed complaints. But this time, they had bumped the daughters of a board member. And worse, women of color, on official business. A PR nightmare. One exec summed it up in Slack with brutal precision. They fumbled their own future trying to defend legacy privilege. Unforgivable. Denise sat silently in the HR holding room, her face pale and her hands trembling. Her supervisor entered without a smile. You've been placed on unpaid leave, effective immediately, she said. The investigation is ongoing, but initial findings suggest a pattern of microaggressions documented by at least 3 former passengers. You also violated 3-tier protection protocols. Denise tried to protest. I was just trying to accommodate VIPs, No, Denise, her supervisor said flatly. You were trying to protect the comfort of people who looked like you. And in doing so, you jeopardized this company's entire public integrity. Miles above the Atlantic, Zee reclined her seat slightly, trying to relax. But her mind buzzed. You think the Langstons will feel any consequences? She asked. Zara glanced up from her tablet. If I know Dad, they'll feel it before we land. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Majestic's legal team had already flagged Mr. Langston's firm for potential ethics breaches. Emails between him and a lower-level airline staffer revealed a pattern, pressuring gate agents to reassign seats under the guise of loyalty incentives. The language was coded, but unmistakable. One email even said, if it's a younger flyer, they won't make a fuss. Move them. News of the twins' incident hit Twitter like a lightning bolt. A fellow passenger had quietly filmed the tail end of the lounge confrontation and uploaded it under the caption, "Black excellence doesn't owe you comfort. Shout out to the Caldwell twins." Within hours, #Caldwell twins and #Majestic Mesh trended across multiple platforms. Thousands voiced support, others shared similar stories. One particularly viral tweet read, "It's not just seats. It's how often we're asked to surrender what we've earned just to make someone else more comfortable." The cultural moment was building, and the brand damage was snowballing. By the time the Langstons landed in Zurich via a separate airline, their names were being quietly removed from Majestic's loyalty database. A formal message from Majestic's chief ethics officer awaited them in their hotel inbox. It was short and devastating. Their elite status had been permanently revoked. Future booking privileges suspended. No explanation required. And in a more personal blow, an executive liaison had also informed their Zurich-based partners of the internal ethics review underway. The Langstons' attempt to climb over the Caldwells had triggered an avalanche, with themselves beneath the snow. In the Zurich lounge, Zara and Zee stepped off the plane to a flurry of camera flashes. The Global Tech Herald had gotten wind of the story mid-flight. A correspondent now waited to speak with them before the summit. "We won't speak on the incident," Zee said graciously. "This trip is about EquiChain and the communities we serve." The reporter respected the boundary, but as they left, she said, "Just so you know, my 13-year-old daughter saw the clip. She said, they look like me. They didn't back down." That moment meant more than any interview ever could. Back at Majestic headquarters, a special committee had been convened to address what was now called the Caldwell incident. Robert Caldwell, already a board member, entered the room with measured calm. "This isn't just about my daughters," he began. "It's about a culture. One that believes money equals merit. One that whispers, 'You don't belong here,' to people who've worked twice as hard." He looked around the table. "We're not going to fix that with PR spin. We're going to fix it by tearing out the rot, and rewriting what first class really means." He dropped a thick policy draft on the table. "Starting now." The policy document Robert Caldwell introduced was sweeping in scope. Titled Equity Above Altitude, a Majestic Mandate, it proposed structural changes across Majestic's operations. From gate agent protocols to lounge access guidelines and first-class assignment ethics, the mandate forced every employee, top to bottom, to relearn the value of fairness. Most radical of all was the Seat Integrity Pledge, a new clause that forbade any seat reassignment for non-emergency reasons once confirmed, regardless of status. Loyalty could no longer buy entitlement. "You don't earn first class with years," Robert declared. "You earn it with money, merit, or mission." At the same time, Human Resources delivered their final report on Denise. It confirmed not just this incident, but a history of coded language and seat suggestions disproportionately affecting younger, non-white, and solo female travelers. Denise sat stone-faced as the findings were read to her. Her voice was thin when she finally spoke. "So that's it?" she asked. "After 15 years?" The HR director, a no-nonsense woman named Arlene, replied evenly. "You didn't lose your job for one mistake. You lost it for building your career on quiet ones." A silence followed. "Please gather your things. Security will escort you out." Denise's walk through the terminal was starkly different from the strut she'd carried days earlier. Gone were the polished shoes and confident smirk. In its place, silence, regret, and the burning sting of relevance lost. Passengers barely glanced her way, but a few employees, aware of the internal memo, looked up with a mix of pity and quiet relief. Her power had evaporated, and in its place stood accountability. For the first time in years, Denise was forced to reckon with what she'd done, and what she thought she'd always get away with. Meanwhile, Zara and Zahi had finished delivering their keynote at the Zurich conference. The applause was thunderous, but what followed stunned them. A major European venture firm publicly pledged $5 million in seed capital toward expanding Equichain's infrastructure across underserved African nations. "Your Grace Under Fire spoke louder than any pitch deck," the senior partner said. "But your tech? That's the revolution we're investing in." As they stepped off the stage, an email pinged on Zahi's phone. Subject line: Majestic Airlines Global Campaign, Image Approval Request. Attached was a stunning photograph, the twins, seated in 1A and 1B, mid-laugh, laptops open. Zara clicked the file open as they sat in a cafe near Lake Zurich. The caption beneath the photo read, "Majestic Airlines, First Class has a new face." The campaign was slated for print, digital, and in-flight media across all Majestic routes. It was more than branding. It was a reckoning. "They're not just using us," Zahi said quietly. "They're finally listening." Zara nodded. "We didn't ask to be symbols. We asked to be seen. And now, we are." Outside the window, the reflection of their campaign banner rippled across the lake's surface, bold, brilliant, and unstoppable. Across airports worldwide, Majestic's new campaign dropped like thunder. Billboards in JFK, Heathrow, and OR Tambo lit up with the image of Zara and Zahi Caldwell, poised and smiling mid-conversation in their VIP pods. In-flight magazines carried full-spread interviews, positioning them not only as tech founders but as the new face of global travel. The caption was everywhere: "Majestic Airlines, First Class has a new face." For many travelers of color, it felt like the airline had finally caught up to the world around it. But for some, including Caroline Langston, it was the moment the walls began to crack. Caroline Langston sat in her upscale Boston brownstone, clutching a glass of rosé as her television aired a segment on CNN titled, "Airline Justice, How Two Sisters Redefined First Class." Her face twisted as the anchor highlighted Zara and Zahi's story, detailing how the twins had endured casual racism and emerged as international icons. Caroline's husband, Richard, walked in just as the camera panned to a Majestic billboard in Times Square. He looked from the screen to his wife. "Isn't that the flight you were ranting about last week?" She didn't answer. But the growing tremble in her hand said everything. A day later, Richard Langston received a call that ended his prestigious legal career. It was his managing partner. "We've reviewed the footage, Richard. The behavior, though not yours, reflects on this firm through association. The Caldwells? They own most of our transport sector clients. We're choosing the firm over you." Just like that, Caroline's behavior had cost him everything. He hung up without a word. When he turned around, Caroline was standing in the doorway, pale. "They let you go?" she whispered. Richard's eyes were dead calm. "No. You let me go the moment you decided your comfort mattered more than anyone else's dignity." The Langston name, once synonymous with power and exclusivity, quickly became a parable in corporate circles. Internal newsletters circulated within law firms and consulting networks. "What's your privilege? One mistake, one assumption, can cost a legacy." Meanwhile, Zara and Zahi remained graciously silent, declining interviews that asked about the Langstons by name. "This story isn't about revenge," Zara told Forbes. "It's about restoration. We were never trying to win a battle, we were trying to hold our ground." Still, the consequences rolled in. And for those who watched the world tilt in real time, it was as if karma itself had booked a round-trip ticket. In their Brooklyn apartment, the Caldwell twins sat surrounded by framed headlines and letters from young girls inspired by their story. One read, "I used to think first class wasn't for people like us. Not anymore." Another, "You made me want to code." Zahi smiled as she pinned the newest one to the wall. "You think this is what Mom meant?" she asked. When she said, "Don't dim yourself to make someone else feel brighter?" Zara nodded slowly, eyes misty. "Yeah. I think this is exactly what she meant." In the quiet that followed, it was clear, their victory was never about a seat. It was about making space, for everyone. Weeks after the Zurich summit, Zara and Zahi received an invitation that surprised even them. A formal letter, embossed with Majestic Airlines' golden emblem, arrived at their office in downtown Brooklyn. Inside, a personal note from CEO David Crane: "Your conduct, innovation, and grace represent everything we want our airline to become. I'd like to invite you both to join Majestic's new Equity and Innovation Advisory Board. Together, we can redesign the skies." Zahi raised an eyebrow. "Didn't see that coming." Zara grinned. "Not just passengers anymore. Now we're in the cockpit of change. The first board meeting took place in Majestic's glass-paneled executive wing in Atlanta. Half the room was filled with executives and compliance officers. The other half? Community leaders, engineers, and passengers who had once filed discrimination complaints. Robert Caldwell sat at the head of the table, flanked by his daughters. "This isn't optics," he began. "This is infrastructure." Z took the floor next. "Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through policy, through procedure. That ends here." She flipped to the first slide of their proposal, the elevation model, travel reimagined through equity. Their proposal included sweeping reforms, anonymous incident tracking, instant recourse for displaced passengers, bias training required for promotion eligibility, and a customer feedback loop directly reviewed by the board. But the centerpiece was bold, a pilot program where select first-class passengers would be anonymously reviewed post-flight, not for status, but for conduct. Because entitlement, Zara said, is the enemy of empathy. The room sat in stunned silence. Then David Crane stood and applauded. "Welcome to the future," he said. "Let's make it fly." News of the advisory board and the twins' leadership exploded across business media. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline, "From disrespected to directors, Caldwell sisters take seat at the top." Fast Company published a full feature titled Jetstream Justice. Airlines across the globe began auditing their own loyalty programs, and a think tank in Amsterdam invited the Caldwells to keynote their International Aviation Conference. "Your blueprint is the gold standard," they wrote. "You've redefined what it means to board with dignity." Still, the sisters stayed grounded. "Our job isn't to be exceptions," Zara said in a speech at Spelman College. "It's to open doors so excellence like yours feels normal, not miraculous." Zay added, "If we have power now, we'll use it to flatten the runway for everyone behind us." The auditorium erupted with cheers. In that moment, surrounded by bright-eyed young women who saw themselves in the twins' journey, Zara and Zay Caldwell weren't just industry leaders, they were legacy builders. In a sunlit but quiet corner of Martha's Vineyard, Caroline Langston now spent most days alone. Invitations to galas had dried up. Their yacht membership was quietly rescinded. At the grocery store, whispers followed her through the aisles. Even those who didn't know the full story knew enough. She was the one who tried to bump the Caldwell twins. The humiliation had metastasized into isolation. Caroline stared blankly at a newspaper ad for Majestic's new equity campaign featuring the twins. It read, "Seats aren't given, they're earned." She tore the page and tossed it, but the damage was permanent. There was no PR rehab for this. Richard Langston hadn't spoken to his wife in over a month. After resigning from his firm, he took a consulting job in a modest office building near Providence. Gone were the leather corner suites and champagne boardrooms. He now shared space with mid-tier associates and ran spreadsheets no one thanked him for. And yet, there was clarity in the fall. "It took losing everything," he confided to a colleague over coffee, "to realize my silence was complicity. My reputation wasn't ruined by her mistake, it was ruined because I tolerated the kind of entitlement that made her think it was okay." As the Caldwells prepared for a whirlwind tour of global tech hubs, Tokyo, Nairobi, Berlin, their inbox flooded with messages from airline execs, business schools, and even national policymakers. "Would you consult with our Civil Aviation Council?" read one from the UK. "Could you help us reform our loyalty to service models?" said another from Singapore Airlines. The twins looked at each other and laughed. "We just wanted to give a speech in Zurich," Zay said. "And now we're rewriting international airspace ethics," Zara added. But behind their smiles was resolve. They knew they were crafting more than a legacy. They were reshaping an industry. In the US, a surprising figure emerged to offer a public apology. Denise, the flight attendant, recorded a statement as part of a restorative justice initiative launched by Majestic's ethics board. In a subdued tone, she admitted to internal bias, apologized to the Caldwells, and acknowledged the culture that shaped her decisions. "I thought I was protecting standards," she said, "but I was upholding exclusion. I hope my mistake becomes someone else's wake-up call." The video was met with mixed reactions, but the Caldwells issued a simple statement: accountability isn't a destination. It's a gate everyone has to pass through. 1 year to the day after the incident, Zara and Zay stood beneath the very billboard that had started it all, Times Square, glowing beneath their photo. A group of students from an inner-city school in New Jersey approached, clutching STEM textbooks and travel brochures. "We're here on our first plane ride ever," one girl said, beaming. "Our teacher showed us your video. We made vision boards. We wrote essays about the first class we want to sit in one day. Z knelt down and smiled. Don't just aim for the seat, she said. Build the plane. 2 weeks later, while reviewing final edits for their upcoming book Flight Path, Our Journey Through Bias and Beyond, Z received a strange email. It was from an address she didn't recognize, seat@harrington@protonmail.com. Her finger hovered over delete, but something about the subject line made her pause, from the woman who tried to take your seat. Curiosity outweighed caution. She opened it. The message was short. You don't know me, not really. You only saw the worst of me. But I see you now. And I see myself, clearly, painfully. I can't undo what I did. But I hope someday, someone else sees you and doesn't flinch. Thank you for the mirror. Caroline Langston. Z read it once. Twice. Then forwarded it to Zara, who sat in the adjacent office. Should we respond? She asked. Zara read it carefully, her face unreadable. No, she said at last. Some messages are meant to be sat with. Not solved. She folded her laptop shut and walked to the window. Outside, the city shimmered with motion, yellow cabs, steel towers, dreams stacked high and loud. But maybe, she added softly, she's one of the first to learn how it feels to be denied a seat she thought she was owed. Zeri nodded, her silence one of agreement, not bitterness. Later that month, a mural was unveiled at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, right where the lounge confrontation had first taken place. Commissioned by Majestic Airlines, the artwork featured 2 black women rising through a sky of equations, code, and constellations. Beneath it read a quote, "To travel freely, you must first believe you deserve to arrive." Travelers of all ages stopped to take selfies. Airline staff stood a little straighter when walking past it. And more than once, a little black girl stared up and whispered to her mother, "They look like me." On a red-eye flight to Sao Paulo for a tech diplomacy event, Zara leaned her head against the window and watched the stars. You ever think about how one phone call changed everything? She asked, eyes half-lidded. Zay smiled faintly. It didn't change everything, she said. It revealed what was already broken. We just refused to stay silent. As the plane ascended, the city lights fell away and the quiet of altitude settled in. Their champagne glasses clinked softly. Here's to staying seated, Zara whispered, and standing tall. They didn't toast revenge. They toasted reclamation. The following year, Equichain launched a non-profit arm called Skyline Futures, offering coding boot camps and financial literacy programs to youth from disadvantaged communities. Its slogan, "Don't just dream of destinations. Build the vehicle." The organization partnered with airlines, universities, and public schools to provide scholarships, internships, and flight experiences for students who'd never imagined themselves airborne, let alone in business class. One campaign commercial closed on a teenage girl boarding a plane, looking back once before entering the jet bridge. A narrator intoned, "She didn't just earn a seat. She earned a future." On a rainy spring afternoon in Washington, D.C., Zara and Zay Caldwell stood behind a polished podium inside the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. A crowd had gathered for a special exhibit opening titled Black Flight, Innovation, Resistance, and the Sky. The centerpiece? A detailed retelling of the Caldwell twins' journey, from their fintech breakthrough to the viral airline confrontation and beyond. Photos, video clips, news articles, even their original boarding passes from Flight MA204, were encased in glass. The room was hushed as the museum curator stepped forward. "This," she said, gesturing at the display, "is what rewriting the narrative looks like." When it was their turn to speak, Z began with a quiet smile. "We never imagined our journey would end up here, immortalized between the stories of Tuskegee Amen and Katherine Johnson." Zara added, "But maybe that's the point. Maybe our flight wasn't just about an airline. Maybe it was about claiming altitude in a world that kept trying to tether us to the ground." The crowd erupted in a standing ovation. Elders wept. Students took notes. And one little girl near the back whispered, "I want to be like them." As the exhibit opened to the public, the twins walked the room slowly. They passed framed letters, airline memos, headlines that once felt like fire, and now, like fuel. At the far end, beneath soft gallery lights, stood a bronze sculpture, 2 boarding passes fused into a single pair of wings. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Seat 1A. Seat 1B. The day we refused to move." Z touched it gently. "We didn't need to win the argument," she whispered to Zara. "We just had to take our place in history." Zara nodded, eyes glassy. And now, we've landed. Outside, a journalist stopped them on the museum steps. What would you say to the people who think this was all just a fluke? That it was a one-time moment of justice? Zara smiled. Would say justice shouldn't be a moment. It should be policy. Zay added, and we didn't just build a moment. We built a movement. The cameras flashed, capturing their poise, their unity, their refusal to shrink. For the first time in a long time, the story being told about black women wasn't one of survival, it was one of design. That night, as they flew home in their usual seats, 1A and 1B, a flight attendant approached with a handwritten note. From the pilot, she said. Zara unfolded it and read aloud. Because of you, we rewrote our manual. Because of you, my daughter believes she can fly anything. Planes, dreams, systems. Thank you. Zay looked out the window, stars reflecting in the glass. I think we're finally where we're meant to be, she said. Zara reached over and took her hand. Not just where, she replied. Who? And that's everything. Months later, in a quiet moment between speaking engagements and board meetings, Zara and Zay returned to the original lounge at JFK. It had been fully redesigned. The walls were now adorned with art celebrating trailblazers in aviation and equity. A small bronze plaque near the entrance bore their names and a simple phrase, never mistaken. Always earned. They sat in the same seats from that fateful day, now refurbished in deep royal blue leather. No one bothered them. No one questioned their presence. The silence wasn't tense anymore, it was reverent. Zara scrolled through her calendar, panels, interviews, grant pitches. But one event caught her eye, a mentoring session with a group of black high school girls interested in aerospace. I want to tell them everything, she said. But especially that it's not about proving we belong. It's about building the kind of world where that question never gets asked. Zay nodded, sipping her tea. And if they ever find themselves asked to give up what they've earned? Zara didn't hesitate. They don't move. Not an inch. Back at Majestic HQ, the ripple effects continued. A quarterly ethics review showed a 43% drop in passenger discrimination complaints and a 27% improvement in customer satisfaction from travelers of color. New hires reflected deeper diversity across management. And every flight crew member now received implicit bias training, not just once, but annually. Robert Caldwell reviewed the report with quiet satisfaction. It started with 2 women refusing to shrink, he told his team. It became a company refusing to settle. Change, it turned out, didn't need wings. It just needed people who refused to be grounded. The twins' book, Flight Path, debuted at #1 on the nonfiction list. In its final chapter, they wrote, this was never about a seat. It was about space, who gets to take it, who gets asked to give it up, and what happens when you refuse. Our story began at 36,000 feet, but our fight was always on the ground. Readers around the world sent photos holding the book, on trains, in offices, at airports, their own stories mirrored in its pages. It wasn't just a memoir. It was a guide. A declaration. And so, what began with a confrontation became a catalyst. A phone call became a movement. A refusal to move became a lesson etched in policy, memory, and stone. Maya and Zay Caldwell didn't just keep their seats. They changed what those seats meant. And every time a black woman boards a plane, sets a boundary, or claims what she's earned, the echo of that day rings clear. You don't have to move. You never did. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, then don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more powerful stories just like this one, where the underestimated rise, the unheard speak out, and real change begins with a single moment. Your next favorite story is just one click away. Hit that subscribe button now.